What's up, everybody? Hey, welcome to the brand new show right here, Take on the World TV. It's called Sound Off. And if you guess what, we are going to be doing this live, hopefully twice a month, once a month. I don't know how many episodes we're going to be doing, but we're going to be doing them in now till hopefully till we can't do them no more. So thank you guys so much for being here. We have a live panel that we're going to bring in here in a second. But what is this new show? So this is going to be something so different on Take on the World TV, but under a lot of the same themes that we have done in the past. This is going to be a show focusing on Christian music, on the music industry. We're going to be talking about so much different stuff tonight. We're going to be getting into tonight's topic. But you know what? Right now, we're going to bring in our guests tonight. They are our regulars on this show. We have a few people who are supposed to be here, but they can't be here, and they probably won't be here for a while. But it's going to be a growing panel once we get this full show going. But tonight we got some awesome people here that I want to introduce to you. Right now I'm going to bring in Doug Kirschner. What's up, Doug?
What's going on, my friend?
Yeah, Doug is a long time music guy. He's been in the industry for so many different years, and he's going to be talking about that. He's a former record label owner, promoter, concert, everything. That is Mr. Doug Kirschner, and welcome to Sound Off, Doug.
Glad to be here.
All right. Yeah, and next up, hailing right from our friends up north, is Mr. Robbie Davidson. If you guys didn't know, Robbie Davidson is, and behind the name Celebrate Truth, he's a filmmaker, a homemaker. There we go. I just wanted to give him a smile. And he has been in Christian radio and all sorts of different things over his course of his career. Robbie, welcome to Sound Off.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's going to be a good time. All of us talking Christian music.
Oh, yeah. This one's going to be a good one tonight. And finally, tonight, we're introducing somebody brand new. This is Johnny Rocket. He's been in the Christian radio world for probably the last 20 years. I think he's celebrating 20 years. And he is also from the communist country up north. Welcome, Johnny, to Sound Off. How you doing tonight?
I was excited to be asked to be a part of this. I'm like, Chris is going to be here, Robbie's going to be here. But then when I found out that Doug is here, I'm like, sign me up. I will be here every week that Doug is here.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
So some of the people who aren't here tonight, I'm going to be here a regular, but it's going to be hosting by my cousin. His name's Elijah. He's going to be doing a show here on Take on the World 2 solo, but he's going to be hosting this show. And we have a few other people who could not be here tonight, and hopefully they'll be here in the future. But it's going to be awesome. And we're going to have special guests pop in from time to time as well. But tonight's topic, you guys have already seen it. It's called Christian Music Madness. And what we're going to be talking about here tonight is the progressive liberal ideologies that have basically stormed and taken over the Christian music world. And, we're going to get into other things and how the that world has been absolutely destroyed by so many different things, whether it be biblical ideologies have passed away, and all these new doctrines have come right into it, down to, how we absorb the music, right? Well, whether it used to be from vinyl to cassettes to CD, now to streaming, and how these record labels and artists can actually survive. And so we're going to be talking about that from the purpose of ministry versus industry. So we'll get into a lot of different stuff, and so let's get right to it. Does anybody want to say anything before we get started? Because this is a really laid back show, so we don't have to stick to the super format plan that I have. So that I don't really have because I wasn't really the host because our host
I like to
canceled.
just say, everyone lay back.
Lay back.
Just chill. Let's get ready.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. When do you guys believe that this this liberal progressive Christianity infected the Christian music world?
Honestly, I think it was around the time of the start of Keith Green and
Interesting.
the Randy Stonehill era of the music industry. Not that Keith Green is progressive or liberal. He just had a different mindset of how he wanted to do his ministry, but it also kind of walked the fine line of the social justice, socialism format, if that's a term I can use. But that's where I think it started to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're coming off. If you look at the Jesus music era, you're coming off of basically people who were very liberal, right? They were all these anti-war, hippies, right? Who, found Jesus, right? And then, this is when that Jesus music era boomed and became what it was. So a lot of those, progressive ideologies, switched from obviously, conservative, some conservative values within, in that those strict churches back then, right? And you got Larry Norman coming out, who's extremely political, and I think in a lot of really good ways. But obviously, some of those things started to become the mainstay to really go against, mainstream conservative biblical values. Started that degradation, over time. And I don't think it had anything to do necessarily with the style of music, because I think, if you talk to like somebody who's, Baptist, and they would say that all of this started, when they changed the beat of, like the devil's in the beat, right? And you look at today, like, a certain artist, who play heavy style music, and they're very conservative in their values and walk a very, strict line, or they're very, evangelical in their message, like bands like For Today were, or, very conservative bands like Seventh Day Slumber or something like that. So yeah, expound on that, Doug.
Well, I mean, again, the whole aspect of the changing of the landscape of music goes along with the changing of the landscape of the church. But, when you look at the 60s and 70s, there obviously was a more free aspect. And when you got Bob Dylan becoming so-called Christian and tossing Jesus around like he's like a rag doll, you tend to wonder if there was any true meaning in those original artists. Now, I've read Keith Green's book. I followed Keith Green's ministry. Love him. I named my record label after him. But where we're at today centers more around the move and the shift within the church of being accepting of things that should never have been accepted because biblically.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I think exactly as Kelly was saying on the chat. As soon as there was more money to be involved, as soon as that there was a way to make, we had to change whatever the message was to the masses, and unfortunately, money talks, and that's when things start to change.
It's true.
Yeah, I will say this. If you're an artist or you're a ministry and you are looking to actually get involved and serve God in any aspect of your life, looking at that model that Keith Green actually have, and I encourage everybody to go back and watch that Keith Green documentary of his how he came to faith, and then his actual ministry, where Doug mentioned he would play shows for absolutely free. He worked with record store labels, and I saw a lot of used music, CDs, vinyl, and cassettes. And I happened to discover a sealed copy of Keith Green's album, and right on the cover was a little hype sticker. That's what they're called when a sticker's on the cellophane. It's called a hype sticker. And what it said was, if you cannot pay for this record, take it up to the counter and let them and pay.
I saw that. I've seen that before
Yeah.
as well. I have
Yeah,
seen that.
and that is directly his heart and his mission. And
Yeah.
the one thing that I'll share real quick about Keith Green was, before he ended up passing, he felt like Yahweh was calling him to reach the world, and so he thought he needed to do that through creating a secular band, and that he would go on secular radio and infect the world that way. And he kept telling him, you're going to reach the world. You're called to reach the world. And so he had already been doing these worship records, and he had already been doing this stuff. He was preaching to the choir, and he in the documentary you'll learn what he ultimately did was, God called him again to do another worship album. And this album, it was centered around getting people into the missions field. And the last album he would make before he died in that tragic plane crash that and I'll share on that in a second, but that ultimately was the tour that brought hundreds of thousands of people to the missions field. And people are still involved in missions today directly because of that tour and that calling on their life. And they have reached the world. They were infected to take that gospel to places that didn't have it. And that was how God used Keith Green as a vessel to reach the world. It wasn't for his fame or glory, money, any of those things. It was for that. And, on a side note, talking to, people like my father and other people who were involved in the early years, being around the Keith Green movement and all that stuff. He was very outspoken against the Catholic Church, and he was getting very, heavy into that in his pamphlet that he was putting out. It was like an end days type of thing, and everybody believes that there was some type of involvement in his death with the Catholic Church. That's another episode. That's a whole different discussion. But I just want to throw that out there because I find it extremely.
The Pope got him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that going to be our conspiracy show where we try to either make or debunk that Michael Sweet is actually Ted Cruz too?
Ted Cruz.
Well, actually, Doug might be Ted Cruz.
I don't know. I'm not that good looking.
It's that beard. It's that Doug. It's that Ted Cruz beard. So what do you think, Robbie?
For me, man, music's such a powerful medium. It's for me, when I became Christian, I got saved at the age of 21, and I was involved in the secular world and wild lifestyle, but music was a huge part of it. So when I got saved and this whole world opened up to me, like, oh my goodness. And it literally preached to me. I would listen to CDs and I would listen to it. I loved the beat. I'd also listen to it. And I grew my spiritual walk immensely in the first couple of years through music, among Bible studies and other things. So for me, the whole ministry aspect, that was a big part for me, looking at music just in general. When it came to, you got secular music, you got Christian music, but really what exactly is Christian music and what is it doing to people? And I know, I can speak on this being in radio and hearing all the testimonies, and I'm sure Johnny can talk about it as well too. But even today, even though the stuff we're going to talk about and we're going to criticize, there's still people that's ministering to them. It's speaking to them. It's changing their life. So again, we have to understand that even though, we can be critical and see things that are moving on, God's still working within that music in a big way. That thing, we cannot deny that. But it's tragic for me to see that the focus, again, the love of money, is the root of all evil, right? It's not money is the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. And unfortunately, I think it wasn't so much the artist per se, but I think, you know, when all of a sudden, and we were talking about this earlier this afternoon, for me, I noticed at the time people were really excited. We're going to get more distribution. But when the secular labels started buying all the Christian labels, I'm like, this ain't going to be good. Short term, yes, it is. But long term, down the road, they could just say, tone that down. And now we're seeing it right now in 2022, that if you're not towing the line or you're not going with what they want, you're literally going to be censored, shadow banned, and you won't even be on, you know, those lists or in the stores or on the list. We were talking about this before. So for me, I just look at it like when I saw this, you know, transpiring, I would always look at music and see like, okay, there was a lot of artists that were basically like, hey man, we're not Christian music. We're just Christians that play music, right? You had like, you know, Mute Math that were, you know, had like different ones that were like, no, we don't even want to be called Christian. And I mean, that to me, I had issues with, because you get to a certain point where you're like, I'm so ashamed. I want to go that other direction. But as far as the Christian industry wanting to, you know, move forward, but appease, like Johnny was saying, to the world, right? To be more open-ended, you're going to run into trouble because you can't please everyone, and you are going to upset certain people. Just like Keith Green back in the day, whether he was right or wrong, he was talking negatively about the church, but he was standing strong to his convictions. You know, right. The one thing that we're not seeing today is people aren't standing strong to their convictions. Why? Because cancel culture is scary, man. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to provide for my family, right? Instantly, it gets you to kind of shut up. So I think over time, that pressure has been there just to be like, hey, man, listen, this is popular. This is what's in. Let's move this direction with music. So for me, it's more, I'm frustrated. I'm upset, not just with music where it's gone ideology wise, but also the industry as a whole. I mean, I could rant about it and talk about it, but you know, I'm not so keen on looking at saying, hey, pinpointing exactly when this took place or when did this creep in. I think the devil was creeping in all the time. He was wanting to corrupt it because it is so incredibly powerful. When you minister through music, right? Music's right in the Bible. Who do you think created music, right? It can be used for good or evil. It can be used for glorifying God, right? And truly worshiping him and bringing honor and glory, right? Or bringing honor and glory to yourself and sin and all this other stuff. So to me, this has always been assaulted and attacked. And at the beginning, I know that labels were like, hey, here's the conduct and we're going to take this seriously. But over time, I think it just got watered down. So I don't know specific times or places. I just know that this was the trajectory and we haven't seen anything yet. Like we haven't even seen anything yet, which maybe we should discuss. How do you bring that back, or maybe start something else where it kind of recreates what that vision was from the beginning of saying, let's keep it pure, you know, in a body of artists. And because I see the trajectory of where it's going when you've got Warner and you've got Virgin, you've got all the Capitol and all the big labels, especially with the woke culture. Hey, man, you even talk negative about anything to do sinful that the world doesn't deem sinful. You're not just not going to, you know, go that direction. You're not going to exist. You're gone.
Yeah. But well, see, that's where the industry went wrong, is they involved the mainstream end. And, you know, you had EMI buyout Tooth and Nail. You had EMI buyout Forefront. You had, I mean, most of the bands that we are talking about now, they've been in that culture, the buyout, the selling out and selling of Christ. Whereas the bands that I worked with or grew up with, you know, they were actually on Christian labels. They were on labels that were allowing them to speak their mind and speak through, you know, the Bible. And the problem that I saw was that once these labels sold over to the mainstream end, it started stopping the message. The message had to be toned down. I mean, you got stuff like when POD signed to Atlantic, being told you can't say Jesus, you can't say Yah or Yeshua. You had to say Jah, because Jah was more one, radio friendly, and they didn't know if it fit, mixed in with being part of the reggae Rastafarian movement. So
it's interesting though, right? In 2020, all of a sudden you got Kanye right? Jesus on every, right on the album cover, and it's no big deal. So,
Right.
we can discuss this as well too, right? Where there's this weird dichotomy going on where you're right. It was, hey man, can you tone that down? I mean, I was riding around with the Newsboys and and even with a crossover hit, and they were kind of talking about kind of the way the pressure was and the way it was to get mainstream acceptance. And hey man, tone that down, right? And the minute the labels, not so much the labels, but the minute that people caught wind that they were Christian, that was it. They were dropped, So it was almost like, okay, look, if you're going to be a Christian artist, be a really amazing Christian artist, but don't try to be the secular Christian artist, because you're not going to last long, or you're going to have to water it down. And then, yes, maybe mute math, you can become huge, but you know what? You're not mentioning Jesus at all in any of your songs. You wouldn't even dare to think about that, because you're going to get in trouble. Right.
Well, let's before we get to today, because I think here's what I would like to do is walk us down a little bit of journey as we get to this progressive ideology. Why don't you start, Doug, and just walk us down the 80s?
Explain the progressive, for people that are coming in or tuning in, they may be like, what are these guys even talking about? What is progressive ideology?
Progressive liberal ideologies that infected not only the Christian music scene, but it was infecting all the Christian churches, all that stuff. But why don't you take us down a journey throughout the 80s, and we'll walk through to the 90s and get to where we're at today, because it is an absolute mess today. So
well, I think that you had with, we talked about Keith Green, but one of the biggest movements that gets pushed under the rug is the whole JPUSA, Jesus People USA movement, where you had the band Res Band. And I know these people. I love these people. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying their ideology is different than mine. So they've done good. People have gotten saved. So please, if any of them are watching, or any of my friends are watching that are totally in disagreement with this, but JPUSA was a commune. They built a commune around the band's ministry, and they built not only the commune, but they built a record company. They built a recording studio, a t-shirt company that manufactured t-shirts for, at least in the 90s to early 2000s, 90% of the bands that were out in the industry. We saw that rise, but they also owned and ran one of the biggest Christian music festivals, I would say, ever, which was Cornerstone Music Festival. And, so you could say that what they were doing was ministry, but a lot of it had to do with selling a progressive idea of the United States, or just a belief that we should have free healthcare. We should have, everything should be taken care of through the government. And, you guys in Canada are seeing the effects of that. But I think as that movement progressed, it got even more progressive, as in, at one point going to Cornerstone Music Festival, you couldn't tell it was a Christian festival versus a secular festival. There was more drugs and alcohol and sex and stuff going on at that festival, intermixing with people preaching. And it was somewhat accepted.
I went to Creation, and I didn't see anyone drinking and doing drugs. I'm sure people were doing it here and there, but when I went to these big events, I definitely saw a difference between secular and Christian. Not getting into the ideology, so I guess we're specifically talking about that, but I'm just saying, I could see bands on stage that were clearly Christian and were doing that. So if we're talking about specific artists, it's one thing, but for me, and I know this happens, they talk about the big festival, I forget what it's called, in New Zealand. And then the joke is that there's more drug, sex, and rock, there at this Christian festival in New Zealand than even at secular concerts, right? But I think overall, I'm just going, in my experiences at Creation, And to tell you the truth, at that time, I wasn't very critical. I was just so happy that I was bringing people and ministering to people. And honestly, they were like, whether, I wasn't into mortification, but I'd meet a guy that was into death metal, like hardest stuff. And I'd be like, dude, check this out, right? Man, who are these guys? So for me, my angle is all about the ministry of it in there. And I can see the progression and it breaks my heart, quite honestly, because I see it stifling it through this progressive movement. And what it's doing, it's choking it. But as far as it goes, I think that, the music itself with the progressiveness, and I was never part of Cornerstone. Like you said, Cornerstone Conference, like our festival?
Cornerstone Music Festival.
Yeah. And
correct.
Where was it? We have another guy who actually played Cornerstone in the chat room, who will be a guest on this show, which is Alan Aguirre of Scattered Few.
Nice.
Yeah. So he'll be on the show. So he'll be
sorry to interrupt. I'll let you continue on. But again, I wasn't familiar with Cornerstone. I'm referencing Creation, the ones that there was Creation East and West. And what I'm saying is, from my experience there, it was a very, I guess, good experience. But again, I wasn't looking at
two different worlds, Robbie. Two different worlds.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's two different worlds.
Okay.
That was the CCM
version. Gotcha.
Version. Yes.
Okay. This is more the edgier kind of rock. Okay, rock version. Gotcha. Okay. I didn't know much about it.
But again, I went for, I think my first year was 92 to I went all the way up until 2001. And so the ministry was there. I loved it. I'm not saying that it was bad per se, but I'm saying that there was a difference of opinion regarding people's, I know Alan's going to disagree with me, which is okay. But I think that being somebody who was looking in on the outside, but I don't know. It's just there was a more freer thinking there. It's kind of like where Cornerstone stopped. Now audio feed has picked up, and it's gotten where they have gay pastors preaching. They have, all this other stuff going on that is not biblical.
Do you think for them more the idea was like, hey man, let's just love everyone and God is love? And do you think it was that kind of that hippie mindset within Christianity, like, hey man, how can we just be like on stage singing a song, hating, even though it wasn't hate, the idea is like, hey, let's just embrace everyone, right? I mean, right. Clearly is wrong and it's going bad. But what I'm saying is, you have to look at the intentions and like, I don't think they were like sitting there like conspiring and let's take down the Bible. I think they were honestly looking at like, hey, let's just embrace everyone, love everyone, man. You know what I mean? Let's embrace everyone, because the idea that, our music will spread, distribution, the world, will hear our music, right? The more people that we just embrace, right? So I've always looked at it like this idea, quote unquote, the church trying to appease the world, to attract the world to the church. And it never is going to work. It's disastrous to start with, because you start compromising, you start doing things. It's like when you're looking to the world for direction on what you're going to do, I think you're going to trip up many times.
Right.
Yeah. Well, right from there's so many things that happened in the 80s, from the Amy Grant divorce saga to so much stuff that happened throughout the 1980s, and then Stryper being, this big Christian band who never played a Christian show, which was doing some amazing stuff back in the day, and they were actually doing real ministry. And we're not talking about them, obviously, in that note. But as we progressed into the 90s, using that word progress, this is what I see. Maybe Johnny, you can elaborate on this. But this is what I saw, was that as we got into the 1990s, this next step of progression of the Christian artists, and I'm not saying the music wasn't very good, but it became this whole thing where it was, the rock, the hip hop artist, especially as we get closer to the 2000s, was that they were more artists who happened to be Christian rather than Christian artists, and I think this was that progression of allowing some of these these liberal ideologies that we're seeing today just start to infect. Johnny, why don't you elaborate if you think or disagree with that. So.
No, I think you're pretty bang on in that time frame, and that's also when I think that Christian music started to become a lot more popular. Was that mid '90s headed off to the zeros, when it was you had to figure out what your lane was and then kind of move into whatever that sound was, wherever the artist was going to go. And you look at, and I think when DC Talk and Jars of Clay kind of broke out, that was kind of the next step for the Christian music scene.
Yeah, and obviously, this also started to become this more marketable. People who were doing this for ministry. Because almost all of those artists that weren't on major labels back then, none of them got rich, right? Unless if you.
But it was one of the fastest growing genres in the entire escape of music. I think that's what attracted the secular labels, because they're like, what is going on here? This is like clocking country. This is clocking other genres. And I remember seeing it, because they were just like, this is literally one of the fastest growing. I mean, it was on fire.
Yeah.
As far as growth.
And Robbie, this is a great opportunity. This was right at the height of your era when
92.
you started your well, not only that, but at the end of the 90s, you went right into your website that you created.
Correct.
Why don't you tell the audience about that? Because I think that's
that was like 90. That was like 99, and the internet, was just really, really new, right? I mean, people didn't even know hardly what even a website was. I looked at it; it was the future. I wanted to, music was a big deal. So my first website was called Eternal Sounds, and it was actually, ironically, kind of what you're doing right now, right? It was used. I was like starting to do that type of thing online, and it morphed into a site called Christian Canada, which was a site kind of like a portal, like a Yahoo for Canada. And quickly it expanded to praise.com, which we were literally one of the fastest growing. We became one of the largest Christian destination sites. I ran that for 10 years, but I had like major companies, Crosswalk, they're flying me down to Virginia, and people were wondering, what is this guy doing in Canada where he's growing this site? I mean, we had our own instant messenger. We had, music reviews, book reviews. We had our own email. I mean, it was literally Yahoo, but for Christians worldwide. And it was growing like crazy, right? But again, even that, one of the perks of running that site was all the CDs that the companies were sending me, right? Because before I did that, I worked in Christian retail, right? So I've done Christian retail as well, after this. And so I was just like, it was just mind blowing to get all of this products from all these different things. And we had people reviewing it, kind of like, Jesus Freak Hideout and that sort of thing. But it started off with music, and that was always the thing. And then obviously I did the internet for about 10 years and other things after that. But yeah.
So but
it was exploding. Like what I'm saying, my point is the internet was exploding. The genre itself was just absolutely exploding. We couldn't keep up. Like I remember when I worked retail, a massive box of music every single month. You couldn't even keep up with it. It'd be like, 10 different rock artists and like 10 different, every genre. It was just like, it was coming out. Like they were just pumping it out, man. The rep would come in from CMC here in Canada. Right. And, and you'd be listening to stuff beforehand. But like you're saying, at that time though, I think one of the biggest crossovers was Flood, right? With DC Talk. And with Jars of Clay. That changed the game. With Flood, would you guys agree that Flood was kind of a breakthrough, like just what is going on, right?
Yeah.
They're blowing up everywhere. But I think that was kind of a combination of a few other things. And like I said, I remember the metrics looking at it, and there was no doubt Christian music was just flying off the shelves. And it was the fastest growing genre in many different metrics. Nelson's was basically saying this is taking out many other genres. So secular labels are like, hey man, we got to get a piece of this. Unfortunately, moving in there, now they're going to start controlling. Hey, man, we don't mind this and this. We're going to give you your freedom. I remember at the beginning, I said, don't you think there's going to be some issues with this? No. They're giving us all the freedom we want. Well, that didn't last long. They started dictating, and we're seeing this happen present day.
And I think, what you said right there, Robbie, and Doug, I'm going to send it over to you. But I think this was the next aspect, right, of it was one of the fastest growing genres. Right. It was being accepted, right? Jars of Clay, POD. Doug, you were starting your record label at this time,
right?
And I think at this moment, young people in faith, whether they grew up in church or they thought it was a fad, and oftentimes it's criticized, and I think there's some validity to this, is that, when young people got into Christian music in the 90s, a lot of them, especially some of these bands, Tooth and Nail artists, who aren't even believers today, right? Because, let's be honest, most of these artists aren't believers today. And if they ever
you'd be hard pressed to find a believer in most of the bands that came out even the 80s.
Yeah, true. Well,
we need to talk about that, because that's really curious to me.
Let me make my point, Robbie. Hold on. Let me make this point before I forget it. I want Rob. This was the big thing, is that the artist chose the Christian route it was the easy way into the industry. And I think this was that next step, because they weren't doing this in the 80s. They weren't trying to be Christian artists in that late 90s, mid 90s, that Christian route, because we had bands like MXPX who are completely against the faith now. And they would just mention Jesus in a song with a girl, and they're Christian artists, and their parents go, okay, I guess, because they said that one time. This was that route, that these bands were taking. As a record label owner right at that height, what's your perspective of that? And then Rob, you go. Sorry.
Well, the reality is that because not only did I own a record label at the time, I was also a music buyer for a Christian music store. And it was strictly at one point just a music store, and then it moved in. They bought out a bookstore, but the reality is that you had this poster. I think it was like I want to say a 24 by 36 poster that had, if you like
I hate that
Slayer, you're gonna like Mortification. If you like,
I love that. I know we can get to that debate, but for me, that poster. Yeah. I loved it. I loved it. I picked all my music.
It
was so inaccurate.
It was. I will give it that. There's some that were way off. It's like, what are they thinking? But some were pretty decent.
Well, yeah, but
Eminem and KJ52 totally nailed it.
Boy, artists hated it. Bands hated it. Boy, did bands hate it.
Obviously, they're the same.
Yeah.
I can't even go there. The reason for the whole blow up of the we'll call it the Tooth and Nail era of Christian music was because kids were hungry, parents were tired of saying no, and I came from a time where I went to church, and my youth pastor, when I was wearing my Striper Against the Law T-shirt, made me turn it inside out because it was satanic. And it's like, you should listen to Vengeance Rising if you think that Striper is satanic. But my whole aspect for my label was to be ministry, right? It wasn't about money, because as an independent label, you couldn't get money. You were investing. You sold 27 inches or 15 CDs at Cornerstone or whatever festival you're at, and you just reinvested that money. You didn't have big companies like EMI backing you. So the thing of, you brought out MXPX. I knew them back then, don't really know them now, but I would for sure say that they weren't really saved. They weren't really a Christian band. They were signed strictly because they were teenagers, and they weren't controversial, to say the least. It's just that whole mantra and mentality of thinking that they had, because a lot of the Tooth and Nail bands, all you had to have was like one person on the band to be a Christian.
Yeah,
and they used that whole. I can remember Cornerstone, or when they would come and play concerts at a club here in Ohio or across the country, they would say that I'm a Christian, but we're not a Christian band thing. At some point, you've got to take responsibility for your actions and take responsibility that if you are a Christian, you're standing on the stage, you have a pulpit there, you are responsible for what you say, what you do, and the life you lead, because you have impressionable teenagers and people watching you every night, buying your music and looking up to you. And so they took gospel to what all these artists said. So here we are now.
But thank God, and I mean that we are where we are now, because in the era of an MXPX or these bands that were coming up, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have these things to be able to follow them on all the socials, on the Facebooks and the Twitters and whatever else.
Right.
And so we had no idea. So there's this generation of people who, you know, we latched onto an MXPX or a POD or whoever, and that's what now sparked us into Christianity and music now, where I think I look at my kids, man, it'd be a lot tougher to be able to look at a Christian band now and then, because you have the internet and you have all these different people that, oh, I'm going to look up to so-and-so. And then all of a sudden you follow them on Instagram and Twitter and realize, oh, they're not good people.
Well, I mean, I look at, and I've asked my dad this several times, you know, you had to have been crazy at some point to let me go on tour with some of the bands that I worked with. And, you know, I mean, Jeremiah Dirt was one of them. So, you know, that should let you know, if you know anything about Jeremiah Dirt, he's awesome. I love him. He's my brother. But, you know, we were kids too. So doing the record company and doing concerts and stuff, we were doing stuff like, you know, we mimicked a lot of the stuff that we saw in the mainstream market. Like, I was totally into hardcore and punk rock. So my shows were done at VFW halls, or, I mean, pretty much anywhere that had electric that would let you open up a door and have bands play. That's pretty much where we did them. But you had the realm of, you know, when I look back at like a lot of the bands that I listened to, like Deliverance or Vengeance or Tourniquet, you had a pastor giving a letter in that album saying, I trust these guys. These guys are great. These guys are who they say they are, and basically giving his stamp of approval over that album. And come to find out, and Bob Eamon's awesome, but come to find out that the lead singer of Vengeance, he's now a devout, or quotes, a devout Satanist. So thank God we didn't have the internet back then, because I don't think half of those bands would have ever gotten where they were.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these bands that were formed, I mean, they usually like met in high school or college, and, you know, they're fairly young. They're just starting life. And I mean, I don't know what the average is of Christians that lose their faith after they graduate college. It's astronomical. They might, you know, like even the public school system and all that, like there's studies that show that. So I guess we shouldn't be so surprised when you have a bunch of kids that are just early stages of life. They're like, you know, probably going to church, you know, they're the Christian parents, and they're like, hey man, this is great. We can be stars in the Christian music, but really there's no foundation. And again, I'm not judging any of the artists or bands, but it comes down to where we're seeing this. Like I mean, that was shocking when you said, I don't think there's any like bands that are even Christian anymore. And you're like, that's crazy. You know, if you actually think about that, that's sad and depressing.
There's a handful that I can think of off of the top of my head.
That's crazy. You know, like that'd be an interesting thing just to go through, and like which ones are actually still like really passionate, you know, understand the ministry. I mean, it is a business. We have to recognize that it's not just a ministry. There is a business component to, you know, music production, labels, you know what I mean? Concerts, that's a business, right? But the question is, what's that balance, right? Between ministry and business. That's the dichotomy that I think is really important. But to me, yeah, that's really sad. But what's even sadder is the next generation, like my kids, what's the music that's going to be really cool for them? That's really not, you know, mom and dad's music. You know, remember when we were young, we didn't want to be listening to the same music as our parents. Okay. Right. We did. So the question, and this is what aggravates me, is what's available for the kids that are growing up now when it comes to genres, when it comes to good, you know, Christian music, heaven forbid, you know, ministry minded. At least we had, even if they were faking it back then, the fact of the matter is they had good, solid lyrics that were pointing people to look into the Bible.
Right.
So for me, it wasn't like, I don't ever look at the person. Like if we were going to look up on YouTube or we look up on social media, we probably wouldn't recommend any music because we'd find something, and be like, oh, what? They don't believe in that? No, thank you. It'll be some doctrine. You know what I mean? It'll be like, nope. And I mean, music, I think we have to understand, we have to be a little bit more tolerant when it comes to, especially kids. What's the alternative? And we can get into that, Chris, because you horrified me with saying there's a lot of stuff right now in today that makes Marilyn Manson and the most extreme, stuff that's going on in the secular industry as it progresses and gets more and more dark. It's a shock value, right? We were shocked with Madonna, but now there's like artists that would just make Madonna look like a choir girl. So I just think, to me, what we're missing is the ministry component. And I know for a fact it really ministered to a lot of youth. And sure, some lost the faith or whatever. I mean, if you're getting saved and your foundation's in music, you probably should check yourself. It's different, but it also helps growing up with this influence and having kids that are listening to the same thing. You feel like a community, and that you can trust it. And even with the radio station I was with, it was like safe and fun for the whole family. The whole family can listen to that music, even if it's harder and edgier. You don't have to worry about swear words and stuff. So there is that component to the whole Christian music scene, that it was safer alternative for children.
Yeah, but that's even changing. I think, so we got through the 90s, and, and that's getting right to today. I mean, we could bypass so much that has happened, just for time's sake. But, we've seen such a rise of political liberalism and this woke mentality that has dominated views. And, one thing that you talked about earlier, for example, right now, there's an artist who is a believer. And I think, somebody had mentioned this, earlier they were asking, about Torah music or something. A lot of artists, you actually don't know what their beliefs are, because a lot of their beliefs are censored. And there's an artist who is very conservative and as a believer and happens to believe in some of the things that our channel talks about in regards of feast days and some things like that. And I actually had an online discussion with him. Is this artist called Bryson Gray. And nobody knows this artist in the Christian world because he's blocked by the Christian world. And his latest song is actually called Let's Make Jesus Trend. Okay. And so that's the name of the song. New release today, doesn't talk about it. Not played on Christian radio, right, Johnny?
Nope.
not put out there, because he has a very political stance to his music, right? He says things like he went number one on the hip hop charts, number one on not Christian, on mainstream hip hop, for his track called Let's Go Brandon. So you guys may know him at this point because he was the number one trending person. He was on Candace Owens, all of this stuff. Christian industry says this guy doesn't exist. Yet his latest song is called Let's Make Jesus Trend.
Question. If he didn't come out with Let's Go Brandon, and his first single that was blowing up all over the world was Let's Make Jesus Trend, do you not think that the Christian industry would have picked it up?
Potentially, but it wasn't the case.
I know. And that's my whole point. My whole point is, you do something to offend or a little edgy, you're done. Even if you are doing everything to glorify and fit that mold of a Christian artist, and it would be profitable for the Christian industry to embrace him. I mean, he's blowing up everywhere. He's number one,
Yeah, but you won't see this guy on a tour. You won't see this guy being pretty much anything within the Christian world. And so here's
Lecrae won't even mention him and give him a shout out. Say, yo,
no.
My bro Bryson.
No.
Really?
See, they're all at odds with each other because you got guys like Lecrae, who is very pro BLM, and you got Bryson, who is coming out talking anti BLM and actually talking about all of those things. So it's very political. Just like making a basketball team at school or any of these things, right, in a public school, all of these things, right, they're all political. It's about who you know, it's about what you know, and what you believe ultimately, and who wins in their little industry. For example, if Reliant K put out an album today, not that they're a big artist anymore. They would be pushed on New Release Today. They would be pushed in the Christian industry. I'll give a short story here. There's an artist. She's a mainstream artist. She grew up in a Christian youth group in a church. Her artist name is Similar, and you guys may have known her as she is the LGBT artist that became the number. She took her album to the #1 iTunes chart in the Christian music genre because her fans voted it to be #1. So it was the #1 trending thing. So it happened maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years, something
Similar
like that.
is the artist?
Similar, SEMLER.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, so if you go back and you can find that story. So that was the #1 trending iTunes Christian record when it dropped. And so I actually do encourage everybody to listen to that, because she does speak some truths in there about all of these things, about how the church has hurt people, all these things. There's a lot of things that happen within the church that we can obviously have a whole show and things that we talk about on other shows. But for example, she has a song called Toby Mac, and it's all about her writing or making a mixtape for the girls that she was interested in, using Christian worship music, like Consume Me from DC Talk and some Switchfoot songs that were written about God. And she uses those in a mixtape to tell girls how she feels about them. So that's the name of the song, Toby Mac. Why do I mention Relient K? Why do I mention Similar? Well, guess who Relient K is bringing out on tour with them now is Similar, right? This is rocking sort of a lot of the Christian circles, and this is what's happening. This is the progressive takeover of the industry, right? We're seeing everything is very political based. Everything is driven on things that are completely unbiblical, and the labels, the artists, artists that speak out against these things. There's only one, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. But there's very few artists that are in the mainstream world of Christian music that are outspoken on these things, and the ones that are, if they're not big enough, they're quickly silenced. And they've all had their run. And I think, Johnny, this is more of your circle, because you've been around this, interviewing over 1,000 different artists over the last X amount of years, and you're currently still heavily involved in it. So why don't you give your opinion on what is happening today?
And I mean, there's the one thing that I love, if you're given an opportunity, is you have X amount of minutes with an artist. And so there was one over the last few years where we had a little bit of extra time, and we had discussions and said, oh, you can't say those things because it will ruffle feathers. And, I've had issues in the past with labels or other things because I've been outspoken about certain things. So you could sing about Jesus to a certain extent, but if you try to go deeper into it, or you're asking too many questions, or you're asking the wrong questions, then, like you had said, you're easily silenced, and it makes you having a music career difficult, or at least a music career under a label to then allow you to be promoted. I mean, thank goodness for now that there's a lot more independent artists. There's things like Spotify and that you can get your music out there, but it's definitely, you got to toe some sort of line, and you don't want to cross that line, or else we're never going to hear from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, does anybody have any examples of some of the things that you guys have seen? Doug, I think you'd be good. Some of the stuff that you are seeing that is destroying, let's just put it like it is, destroying the Bible within Christian music today. What are you seeing? From worship to all the different ideologies. What are you seeing? Some examples?
Well, I mean, honestly, me and you have gone back and forth about Lecrae. Great artist, We've read that he's changing. And the reality is that the damage is already done because we're seeing it not only with Lecrae, we're seeing it with Andy Mineo, we're seeing it within the whole hip hop movement. A lot of things that are scary. I mean, I try to watch what my kids do, right? I try to watch who they listen to, what's being fed into them. But when you have an artist that is, accepting of Black Lives Matter, okay? But it's not just the Black Lives Matter statement, it's the whole movement. It's so he's accepting of what the actual group Black Lives Matter believes. So you can't be that and be a Christian. There's no possible way. You can't be against the nuclear family. You can't be against God because he, quote, created man, and using the term man as, derogatory. And, you can't, I'm not saying you can't love the LGBTQ community. You can, and you should. But the reality is you can't go against your core beliefs. And that's what I've seen tear up the church. That's what I've seen, tear up even the music scene. Like, I didn't go to Audio Feed when Jeremiah Dirt played it, but the reports that he gave me back were astounding to what artists like Propaganda were saying. And just what he saw, and it obviously wasn't scriptural, obviously wasn't people walking with God. You can say that having a fringe group in the Christian industry is great, but you can only be so weird for so long to where you have to wonder where your values and morals are when you're accepting of sin. You can't, and that's my biggest fight right now is with like the whole Lecrae aspect of where we are. You got into it, a beef, and he actually responded to you, which is
got into a beef with Lecrae and he replied to you. That was the best thing in the world.
Now look,
I'm like, Chris is ruffling feathers. Forget him ruffling feathers, or you're ruffling feathers.
What's so funny is one of his artists, Gavi, recently got in trouble and sort of rocked Twitter world, because he was sending inappropriate pictures of himself to multiple women, and obviously this story broke, and they had to let him go from Reach Records. And I did have a very inappropriate comment, and out of all the comments, somehow Lecrae responded to mine. And
your comment wasn't though out of line.
A little. There was some little bit of things that was a little.
Chris must have felt it, because I think he went back and deleted it afterwards or something.
I did.
You did.
Yeah, because he deleted his comment towards me.
Here's the thing. We can talk and we can criticize, but think about what he gets on social media every day, right? And think about this: when you Reach Records and you've got millions of secular fans and you got 100,000 Christian fans. Who do you think you're going to placate to? I know it must be a struggle, but overall, you're just like, I've got nothing but love over here. And anytime I mention something, they're like, love. Anytime, and that's the thing with Christians, we're very judgmental. I mean, even on the show already, we're already starting on that, that trajectory. Now we're just going to talk about in general terms, but quite honestly, if we zero in on any artist, we will nitpick them to death, right? Because that's just the way we are. And I'm not saying we're right or wrong about it. The fact is, if you're on the receiving end of that, man, you want to turn that off. Right? Even if some of it's convicting, a lot of it is just hate. It's just straight out hate. And the question is, how do you start having those discussions with like a Lecrae and kind of find out where this, went? But as, a person that's Black, that's aligned with Black Lives Matter, and we know that Black Lives Matter, the corporation, right? We all 100% believe that Black Lives Matter, as well as white lives matter, all lives matter, right? That is not disputed. But when it comes to that organization, standing with it, it's going to sell records. It's going to up you in the charts. I mean, it is cool and hip. When you see Nike turning rainbows, you see every corporate logo, going rainbow in a month. This is all about the culture we're in. And now it's like, almost, even if you don't quite agree with it, you're kind of like, hey man, I'm just going to make everyone happy and I'll just go with it. If everyone's making rainbow logos, I'm going to do the same thing. Right. And a lot of artists are like, hey, I don't even want to get political. But by them putting a rainbow flag, even if they're not for it, but just going along to appease everyone, now they become targeted. Now you're aligned with this. And as Christians, as biblical, strong Christians, we're like, that person's no longer Christian. That person now is on the other end of the camp, right? So, I mean, I can be critical from the best of the people, but I always try to empathize and look at the other side of the fence and going, do you think any of us, if we got to the levels of like a Lecrae, you don't think we would trip up? I mean, the Bible is full of guys. I don't think there's anyone in the Bible that was able not to succumb to temptation when they became rich, powerful, loved. It didn't matter, right? They all fell. And so I look at it like, yes, we can see the trajectory and what happened to these artists, but I mean, it would have happened to me.
Yeah, but
probably would have happened to me. I probably would have been long gone. And here's the question though. Lecrae, his entire trajectory, as his entire life, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because most times people veer way off, but yet they come back later in life and they look back and reflect. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But with the whole thing, it's frustrating, because now it's like they come after you so hard if you're not in support of these movements that are literally designed to destroy the family unit. So yeah, we have to get animated and passionate about it, but also we have to understand, like, do we think that Lecrae 100% has lost his way? I'm not so sure. I think deep down inside, there's a war going on. And I think that he's, there's something going on there. God's still working in his life.
Well, that's definitely for God to decide.
I agree. 100%.
Well, let's say this. Let me say this. If you look at David, for example, David, who wrote Psalms 119, the longest chapter in the longest book in the Bible, which is all about loving God's law and following in his ways. And he was a man after God's own heart, even in the things that he did when he fell into sin. His heart never changed. His love for the word, his love for those things. See, this is what we're seeing happening. We're seeing that love for the word of God to start to change, and changing that word of God. And I'm getting some feedback. Somebody's giving me some feedback here.
But if we saw like someone, with the heart of God, and that they went into worshiping other gods, if we watch this, if we witness this, worshiping idols, there's none of us on this panel that would say we think that person's Christian. Even if deep down inside, like you're saying, their heart was still aligned with God. I'm sorry, but once you start worshiping other idols and other gods, I don't know of anybody that would look at that person's lifestyle and saying, yeah, their heart's right with God. I mean, at that point, they're far off, the mark, right? And again, only God can judge, and we can see that trajectory. But it is frustrating how, at what level of tolerance do we have for people? I mean, Lecrae, we were getting I was criticizing Lecrae when I started veering off from albums. I'm like, man, like, there's nothing from the Jesus music days, zero, like, And as he became bigger and bigger in the secular world, it's just Jesus became put on the back burner. And they'll say, hey, music, you don't have to be preaching Jesus in every song. But that only goes so far. When you have a full album of like 18 songs, you don't have one song. You know what I mean? You're kind of like, come on. Like, look at your beginnings and look at what you did and what you've said. I mean, he stood on a lot of stages and gave a lot of speeches, right? It's like, that's a little different than just some band that's Christian. So.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity here, is to look at somebody who is outspoken in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That was somebody who brought up earlier, and that's
too big to cancel.
Yeah, John Cooper of Skillet, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the rant that he's going on and doing at Winter Jam right now. I don't know, Johnny, you know, have you seen it, and what's your thoughts on that?
Robbie had sent me the article, but I know that he's been quite outspoken, and he's from when I met him back in 2002. I think I was at his very first show that he did in Canada with Skillet. To even now, he hasn't changed really in his stance on who he is, what he believes. I believe he's still the youth leader for his youth group, him and his wife. in Wisconsin. And yeah, he's just super good dude. Great guy to interview. And I've always been a fan of John Cooper and Skillet.
Yeah, Robbie, why don't you tell us what he actually said and what he's been
I
actually
mean,
doing?
I don't think he's just outspoken. I think he is putting up the red flags and the warning signs of what is actually coming into the church, not just Christian music, but like that's infiltrating the church. So I look at it like it's almost a cry. It's like he's a watchman in this area. And it seems like he's like a lone ranger in the Christian, as far as a big established artist, he's taking a risk writing the books he's writing, you know, and saying what he's saying and talking about this, in his words, you know, really, you know, a very, very dangerous ideology that's seeping in, and it is a lot further along in its progression than most people think. Oh yeah, you know, that's out here, that's no big deal. He's like, no, watch for it. You're going to hear pastors saying it. You're going to hear this. And what's frightening about it is it's not just when we see some bad theology. The question is, where are they going with some of these ideas, right? When you're starting to get into this wokeism, it's a whole new level of absurdity. We're not just dealing with like sin and evil anymore. We're dealing with an entire twisting of the created order. We're dealing with like, you know, and that I think is completely dangerous. Like we were talking before about the destruction of the family unit, right? But when you start to see what they're trying to do, and again, it's in the education system, it's in the church, and of course it's going to be pushed into the Christian music industry, because it is an industry, right? And it is a large industry owned by secular labels that literally have a rainbow flag that month, and they're going to be asking, hey, excuse me, Christian guy there, I noticed you got your album coming out that month, we need to put that sticker on. Oh, is that going to be a problem? Right? Oh, really? That's going to be a problem. Like all I'm saying is at the point, some people just don't want to rock the boat. So like they might be new, they might be dealing with this. But again, at that point, now it's a slippery slope once you start embracing it and you're like, hey, what does that even mean? So I just think that he's bringing up this critical race theory is a whole new level of insanity, right? And you would think that if they really got to brass tacks, which Lecrae will never talk about, but if he thinks the idea is segregating by race and putting white people with white people and black people with black people and not, this is crazy to the extent of believing that all white people are inherently evil and racist. And I don't know if you guys know, but there is no path to redemption in critical race theory, which John is warning about like crazy. And it's seeping into churches all across North America and Europe. And this whole idea that you're inherently racist and that you're inherently evil, and there is zero path of redemption. There is no way for you to change. And it's destructive and what it's going to do to children and education. And furthermore, with Christian music, when this, again, they're always working multiple generations here, right? We're always looking at it, but they're looking at multiple generations, this whole spiritual battle that we're in. So yeah, I mean, it is progressively going to get worse and worse. And I don't see it getting any better because the secular labels have control of all of it. So yes, you could be an indie artist and, you know, maybe you'll blow up social media, but it's when you start to see what you brought up, let's make Jesus trend, regardless of your ideology. Back in the day, you could be a tooth and nail artist, not one mention of anything to do with Christianity, the Bible, nothing, zero, zilch, and have one Christian member on your band, and they just flew off the shelves. Right? At that point, you knew something was going on. And I didn't criticize it so much because I looked at it as like a gateway. If someone went in there and they bought some tooth and nail, and eventually they got to someone like a Skillet or something, and now he's really giving you the truth. Great, right? We can't just expect every artist to be 100% doctrinally correct. But again, it looked at it as someone going, wow, there's Christian music. What is this about? And for me, when I got introduced to Christian music, I was amazed. It was like, I was like a kid in a candy store, man. I couldn't in my entire life imagine that Christian music was anything but choir music. So when I saw like every genre, you know, from dance music and to rap music, and I was like, oh, I just sat there. Like I just sit in the Christian stores. People remember me. I go to a Christian store and I'd be there for like 5 hours. 5 hours. And I'd just be like, could you listen to everything before you buy it? Looking at the CD covers, right? So for me, it's really nostalgic. And it's really, I look at I don't recognize that all music has to be ministry orientated. But when we're dealing with the Christian music industry, someone, somewhere, some organization, somewhere needs to push or be called to really bringing that back. And and now it should be so easy. We're in a digital age where all of a sudden you don't have to have a label. You can blow up. And again, if you can go make Jesus trend again and it becomes huge, I believe that artists, bands that want to be ministry minded, that don't want, now we're in this perfect age where you don't need a label. You don't need a company. All you need to do is upload a file and sit there and see what happens. And I think of a lot more artists that were brave and they just did it. I mean, there's artists we can talk about that just You know, they don't care if they offend anyone. They're just going to preach the truth. And honestly, some of these artists are surprising. They blow up like crazy. They're very controversial and they're just blowing up because they can't be so much controlled because they don't have this label around them. So for me, that's an important thing. But I also look at music in itself as being, something that, really speaks to someone. That's not so much the lyrics. Keep in mind that music has a lot to do with the beat, the instrumentation. You know what I mean? That's one element of music. And yes, we sometimes elevate the message. The message has to be like, right to the top. And sometimes, yes, it does. But sometimes you can chill back and listen to an instrumental. It's all good. It doesn't need to have lyrics, So I look at it from this point of view when it comes to music. There's a lot of stuff I'm upset about. And I'm hoping and I'm praying that really there's going to be this revival in Christian music where I can call up Johnny and say, Johnny, how many rock bands? I got some guys here that are really into rock music, and I'm trying to witness to them. I want to show them someone that's actually cutting edge and brand new that's come out in 2021. And you're like, oh, dude, I can let you know about an artist that's 50. I'm like, no, some teenagers, right? There's some cool cutting edge teenagers that. These guys were back in the day. They were just like, all these artists were amazing. And now, I was talking to Chris beforehand. I'm like, look, man, if you're going to the youth, you don't want to give all these 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds, even 45-year-olds. John Cooper's about what, 45, 46? Yeah, they want youth. They want teenagers. Well, then let's create a platform. Let's enable something to like get that distribution where it's like, hey, I can give you 10 artists that they're all like in their 18, 19, 20s. Name a band in the last 3 years, in the rock genre that are like 18, 19, 20, they're blowing up in Christian music. I'll wait.
Johnny, that's your realm.
There's none.
That's what is going on, right? So we could have another show, and don't get me on the rant, but I'm like, that's something I really want to talk about because we can talk about, oh, this is dangerous, but how are we trying to change it? How are we actually looking at it and saying, guess what, guys? Our kids, when they get to a teenager level, they've got nothing at this point. They really don't. They really don't have much to work with. So where are these artists going to come with? Or at least, labels going to embrace some teen artists, or are they just going to keep recycling? And don't get me wrong, I love Skillet. But again, he's 45 years old.
I mean,
and Striper, they're even older.
Yeah, but let's be honest, though. Striper, along with POD, are still the, quote, mainstays of Christian rock.
100%. They're like the Godfather, like Larry Norman. When someone comes into music, they start learning about the greats and they start respecting the greats.
Striper's like fine wine, though. They've gotten better with age. I'll go to bat for Striper all day long.
Really, you like Striper? Honestly, I know. I'm kidding. I can see your shirt.
Know.
I can totally see your shirt.
But the reality is that even them, people have been trying to cancel them because Michael Sweet's very outspoken as a conservative. You've got the one bastion of hope that I see surrounding the Christian music or Christian music ministry aspect is the Whosoevers. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that movement. It's Ryan Reese, a son of Raul Reese, who is a pastor of the Calvary Chapel in Diamond Bar, California. You have Brian Head Welch of Korn. You have Sonny from POD, Lacey Strum. You have these artists that are unabashed about their faith in God and their no compromise aspect to it, to their lives, but it kind of doesn't. It kind of stops there in my aspect. You could be Brian Head Welch of Korn and be in the Whosoevers, but you're still playing songs about sex and about all the stuff that Korn does. I mean, I used to love Korn, but the reality is that that's a fine line. But where you have Cooper, you have a guy who is standing on a platform yelling out, you guys need to realize and wake up what's going on in the church, not necessarily in the music scene, but just in the church as a whole. And it's awesome to see it. I'm surprised that Skillet hasn't been taken off all their major secular music festivals, and that they're still doing Winter Jam.
Well, Chris and I were speaking about that. They're too big. They're too big to cancel. It's kind of like Joe Rogan being taken out. He's just too big. Like Skillet. I mean, name a bigger rock band right now.
Right.
Right.
I wonder though, because Robbie, you had said, "Oh, who are your kids going to listen to?" But I'm pretty sure 20, 30 years ago, our parents were like, "Oh, who's Robbie going to be listening to?" And you figured it out. I'm sure that we're going to say, "Who are our kids going to listen to?" I'm pretty sure there's going to be something that'll figure it out, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like.
Don't worry. Don't worry. It'll be Toby Mac because he doesn't die, and
that's true.
He's been.
It will be Toby.
90-year-old Toby Mac's going to be bouncing around the stage. I feel I'm not so. God is bigger than that, and that there's going to be some sort of. There will be bands, there will be artists, there will be music that our kids will be able to listen to. That our parents prayed into us that we would find the music, and we're going to pray into our kids that they'll be able to find the music.
Well, your kids are older, and they have actually had some cool hip music that was good, ministry and good, Christian music. But I'm saying my kids are a lot younger, and at what point, what are they going to listen to? I'm trying to think about this, right?
Well, let me ask you guys this: is right today? Try to give me one artist that's relevant, that's in the mainstream, who is this era's uncompromising, unshakable faith artist, like a Keith Green, a Rich Mullins type of guy, who is all about ministry. Who would you guys go with?
That was for Johnny for sure. He probably.
That's all about ministry. Well, I mean, you got me as soon as you said that's all about ministry. It's like, oh,
come on. I mean,
no, you would know. I mean, you interview these people, and I mean, obviously, it comes out when you have an interview. Like, if it's really like it's all about the ministry to them, and that's a good question.
Is there one that exists today?
I would say if you would ask me 3-4 years ago, I would have said For Today, or Sleeping Giant, but they don't exist anymore. I think if you want to find that, you're going to find that in the underground label Face Down, because their primary goal for their bands are to be ministry and it's business, but they're ministry minded and ministry focused.
Who's out in the CCM world, because that's the most recognized.
There never has been.
Never has.
Rich Mullins and Keith Green.
That was the last of them.
There must be someone. My goodness, there must.
Steve Green.
But this is like ancient stuff we're talking about. Most people are listening that have listened to Christian music don't even know who we're talking about for the most part. Like, this is ancient stuff. But like, there has to be someone out there that, in all the artists, all the bands, seriously.
I mean, Alan Aguirre's retired, so I mean, we can't say him. He's in our chat, so.
I mean, for King and Country, every conversation that I've ever had with Joel and Luke
that's a strong family. They're the Small Bones are very, very strong family. Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of these artists though that unless they're wearing a mask and they've it's a whole masquerade. I mean, I've broke bread and prayed with a number of them, and we've had really great in-depth conversations. I mean, I'm going by what I see. There's a lot of really great artists, but I mean, for King and Country was the first one that I thought of that's somewhat mainstream,
right?
And
I would agree with that one. Yeah, just like the family.
Can they hold a candle to the ministry of Keith Green?
No one can.
No, yeah, well, but you think someone would be able to take the torch? Like, you think by now, there'd be somebody that would take the torch.
Keith Green's ministry wasn't because Keith Green was
God ordained it.
Exactly. I mean, are we getting to a point to where within time, and I could say this within the faith and everything, is that there's a watering down effect that is happening and occurring not only with the music but within churches, and it's really not genuine. It's all industry. Churches are industry. Music is industry. Everything is industry, and there's very few real, true ministries. Pastors get into ministry to have a job to feed their family. Thus, they're stuck in doctrines that they may not even agree with or believe once they actually really read the Bible, right? And then they continue that mindset, right? Is this what is happening? And is God pulling his hand off of his people, in regards of, are these people raising up, right? I mean, from the Messianic music side, there's an artist, Joshua Aaron. I mean, he does some really great stuff. One of the artists that we brought in to take on the world is Becca Shea, and she has a heart for ministry. That is, she could be signed. I mean, she's as talented as any of the mainstream artists out there. She no longer wanted her music to be censored because she wanted to put a Hebrew in her music. And they would always, the record, radio stations would say, what's that weird sound before your song? It was a shofar. You mentioned Yeshua, you say Hebrew terms. Can you don't do that? And she said, no, this is what I am. This is what I do. And so, there are artists out there who have a heart to do ministry. And I think those lines get blurred, even in those great artists of, feeding your family, living a comfortable lifestyle. I think that's all of our, are things that why we do what we do. Ultimately, it is, for those things, our comforts. And, until an artist goes, hey, I'm doing this, I don't care if I get paid, I'm coming to do a free show. And if you can't afford my record, take it for free. Pay what you can, like a Keith Green, right?
But unfortunately with that, having been a guy who toured, and I'm sure Alan can attest to this, but having been somebody who's toured and has done shows for bulk of his life, there are well-intentioned churches, but they expect you to do it for free because you're Christian. They don't realize that you have to have gas to get to the next show. You have to eat so you don't die. And we're not even talking about supplying the needs for your family while you're out on the road. I mean, like when Dirt and I toured, there were great people and great shows, and we got paid, but we never did it for the money because you couldn't. It's like, working as what I do in real life is I'm a probation officer for the juvenile court. I'm not doing it to get rich. I'm doing it because I want to help kids. I want to save some kids from, death of going to hell. So the reality is that if we don't have that mindset going in as an artist, if your pure sole focus is money, it's going to be money. You said at the beginning, Robbie, the love of money. But if your sole focus is Christ, and we see bands like Seventh Day Slumber, they're getting ringed. And the reality is that a Seventh Day Slumber.
What are they getting reamed for?
Just they're open conservatism. Mm-hmm. You have like you said.
See, I don't follow a lot of Christian music because I may be a little bit bitter. And it's not about where Christian music's gone. I'm like, the choices are just dismal. Like, I vent all the time to Johnny. I'm just like, where are the bands? Where are they? Like, it's like a single here. Where are the albums? Like albums that doesn't even exist. So this is not just a Christian issue. This is a transformation of the entire music industry. And I think that is also another thing that we could talk about, going from the days when you get a CD, an entire album. There's a lot of artists that don't even do albums anymore. I mean, it's all EPs or singles and what hits and what doesn't. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, and we can talk about it, but for me, it almost breaks my heart, because again, Christian music was such a huge part of my growth, ministering to others, doing youth ministry, and seeing what it did. And, to this day, and I mean, Johnny can talk about this, there is a ton of people, and I'm sure he gets lots of emails, and we can talk about even just CCM, and we can just maybe criticize them, but I'll tell you, God is using them to speak to people at that time. Maybe they're not, these 5-level theologians, but are they doing what they need to do at that point in that person's life? And I still believe that they are. Even the most CCM type artist, there is no doubt in my mind, when you listen to a song and close your eyes and stuff, and you hear that, and keep in mind that the listener that's listening to it might not have the same intentions as someone that was writing it, and they didn't even mean it. Well, I'm telling you, God can basically take something that was even made for evil and turn it into good. So someone that was just kind of putting down some lyrics, that means something to someone's life, and it draws them closer to God. I'm all for that.
Right. No,
yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I am bitter. So when I get all ranty, I'm like, this, like, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I mean, I wish I could say, this is what we need to do. I have no clue. I don't know where this goes, but it's getting worse, not better, not just with the progressiveness of wokeness, but also, where are the bands? Are they just afraid to come out? Like, hey, you don't even have to be super conservative. Just come out and have a couple songs, helping people, understand the relationship, with God better. That's cool. Give it to the youth. But it's like, other than hip hop and some other ones, it's like rock and punk and all this kind of stuff. There are people, believe it or not, even in 2022, that are, teenagers, and they don't like hip hop. Right. They like punk and rock. Where are these new artists? So I just look at it like, I'm always looking at the next generation, and I want to, see them inspired. And music's a big part in a youth's life, period. Like, if any youth minister is out there listening to this, the importance of music. So it's not even about just that message. It's music speaks to people, and it really shapes them and their peers. And music is one of the strongest, next to a couple of others, but don't underestimate the power of music, for good or for evil.
But where did you find that music back in the day, Robbie?
Well, I mean, I would go to the Christian store.
Okay.
Right. But I'm saying now I go to Spotify, or I go to Apple Music, and I go new releases. And I bring that whole new release out, and I look through that list, and I go through, and I'm like, yeah, I recognize this artist. And I'm looking for new artists, like new bands. And I'm like, I can't find them. If they're not a church, they don't exist almost. And I'm like, I'm just waiting for this new band just to pop up where you see a bunch of kids, like, what are these guys? Where are they coming from? I remember I would open a box, and it would be teen band after teen band. And I'm not talking just teen bands. I'm talking about every genre. It didn't matter, right? It was youth. It was youthful music that was speaking to that next generation. We got a big problem if we don't have a lot of people speaking to the next generation. Not maybe kids that right now they're 16, 17. I'm talking about kids right now that are 4, 5, and 6 that are now going to get to that level. And it's like, what are they going to have at that point? So for me, I'm like, I really don't know. Maybe I'm not looking. Maybe someone can help me out and find out a good website where you can find up new and upcoming bands, even if they're indie. I'm not even asking them to be signed. At least there'd be a database, or there'd be a place, easy maybe playlists on Spotify. But when you go to a Christian rock playlist on Spotify, you find Stripers. You find all the classics, all the ones that already have like 7, 8 albums. Where are the up and coming? Where are the new Christians that are being called by God? And I mean, maybe they're in the garage and they're making that artist, and they're not being found. We have to help people find those aspiring artists. I mean, Skillet one day was probably sitting in a garage. I mean, we hear all the stories of bands. Yeah, they were just doing garage bands. They were just getting together, doing gigs, and all of a sudden they blew up. That's the story of every single band known to music. They started off just playing some music. Maybe they grew up in church or whatever, and then instantly now, they're on all the talk shows. And you're like, well, what was your story? I started singing songs in church, right? So, I mean, there is a story. I'm hard pressed to find out where all of these artists are. Sure, the labels aren't signing them. That's a whole other discussion. Where are they? How do we find them? How do we actually review them? Like Jesus Freak Hideout or whatever. They've got, indie artists up and got they have a little indie section there, right? That's, I guess, something. They review, albums and stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? Is it Jesus Freak Hideout?
No.
Yeah. But but again, on Spotify or on Apple Music, I have both platforms, but I use Apple Music more. I go to Christian music, and I'm like, where are all the bands? They're churches, it's worship music, and CCM, really.
Well, it's still Michael W. Smith,
yeah,
Toby Mac,
yeah,
I mean, you have a For King and Country, but again, they've been around for forever too. Skillet's been around for forever. There is no one new.
I understand that they're not going to be played on radio too. That's another thing too. Like I do understand, if you've got a rock Christian station, sure, they'll be played. But a normal CCM station is just not going to play hard rock. It's just not going to happen unless they have a segmented, period of time. But that's no excuse when you're dealing with a digital age, not an actual physical store where you only have so much inventory and so many shelves. You're talking, you could categorize these things multiple ways. It's not that hard. I just don't understand why they're not categorized. It doesn't have to be the big CCM artist. You could be like indies, up and comings, ones we're watching, whatever. The fact of the matter is, where are these artists? I think there's many, many people that have probably been in garages and in bands and meeting and doing stuff. And it's like their music that they're producing, how are people finding it? We have a big problem if the masses in Christian homes, that parents want to give them good, solid music, that we were kind of raised with that, ministry focus. Well, now we don't have to worry about corporate structure strangling them, telling them what they can and can't do. They're free to produce and make the music they want, and they can give it to the world. The question is, how's the world going to find it?
Well, your only option, for churches to emulate the music that they put into the churches are done by churches that promote false ideologies, things like grave soaking, where these churches lay on the graves of Christian people and family members to soak up literally the souls and the spirits into them. And this is what's being pushed. And these songs are then taken and put into all these churches. And I'm not saying that these churches or people that do that or cover these songs, they're bringing in those spirits. I'm not saying that. I know a lot of people will. But these are the options that are being pushed out there. These are the only things that people know, right? And a lot of these artists. I mean, if you go back and look a few years back,
a lot of the good music is from charismatic churches. If we're going to talk worship, a lot of the best music in worship overall, as far as contemporary, Christian. All I'm saying is it has come from more a charismatic leaning, right? And I'm not going to say that all charismatic people or denominations are bad. What I'm saying is you'll see a lot of that stuff in charismatic circles. But there's no doubt in my mind that when it comes to music, I mean, Delirious is a good example. They're my favorite band. But what I'm saying is they come from a charismatic leaning, 100%, right? But this whole idea of worship, and I mean, in my opinion, Delirious was the one that kind of pioneered and changed the entire worship, as far as if we'll have another show on that, as far as, worship music is going along. And when Delirious hits, it changes. It spirits out and away it goes. My point, though, is it didn't matter. There were things that Martin Smith believed in, and I thought was kooky, and it was right out to lunch compared to it didn't matter. The worship, the music, to me, in that ministry was more important. I know we could get, picky, and I could pick apart Hillsong, but I know that there's been songs that have resonated. That yes, Hillsong, yikes, Hillsong United though. Incredibly powerful worship songs that really have spoken to me. And I understand there's a lot of problems with Hillsong. Don't get me wrong. So if you want to have that theological debate with Hillsong, fine. But if someone's going to say all Hillsong music's bad because they believe in XYZ, I'm sorry, I'm not there, because I have not seen that. Many people that just instantly listened to one Hillsong and they instantly went off the deep end, going into Hillsong music. And again, it all depends what we're talking about here. What age are they starting to listen to this music? If they're youth, they could care less about theology. They just care about music that's healthy for their soul. It's speaking to them spiritually. And we have a real void right now of music that's speaking to youth. And that's where my heart is. I almost became a youth pastor. Obviously, God didn't call me fully to become that, but I've always had that passion for youth. And I'm looking at music as so incredibly important. And if it's CCM, hey, great. But if you got a kid and they're a little bit edgy, they're painting their hair and they want to get a piercing, and they're going to go off into this punk. And I mean, Alan can talk about that. He knows that crowd that they're like, I don't want the CCM. I don't want the Toby Max. Thanks. I want over here. What is that? What's that going to look like? The punkers, the rockers, the thrashers, the whatever. I just don't see that.
What about the frosted tips, Robbie?
The frosted tips. I'm just saying they're going to want something a little edgier than what mom and dad are listening to.
Had frosted tips, so
I liked my frosted tips. Hey, my wife liked them too.
So. Hey, I was a huge Deftone guy, and when Gino did the frosted tips, I was like, yes.
Yeah,
now burn
Chris
those
tried.
pictures.
Chris tried the frosted tips, and look, it was the wrong ingredients. It was the wrong ingredients. I told him, I said, not that way. It's not how you do frosted tips.
I don't even know what's Johnny look like under the hat, because he's always worn hats when I've seen him. So
It's like, keep the mystery, my friend. Keep the mystery.
what's under that highway?
It's all good.
That was
No, that's good. I mean, it's good to have like this first show and just kind of, break the ice, get used to it, and like let the conversation flow. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all passionate. We all kind of, see things, we see issues. We also see the beauty and the amazingness of Christian music, what it did in our life. I mean, we have a lot of memories in it, but also we recognize that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with the power of God using music to speak to people, to minister to people. I mean, we can just talk about music where they're just depressed and music just lifts them up. Music itself doesn't even strictly need to be 100% about Jesus. It could be just inspiring. It could be uplifting. It could be, there's that whole discussion as well too. Music is important and it needs to be in a person's life. And especially with youth, it is going to shape them. And the people they look up to, we can talk about these bad characters in the Christian music scene. You want them to look up to Marilyn Manson? What I'm saying is whoever they look up to, there's going to be faults and issues. I think it's up for us, as parents, to let them know realistically that everyone's going to let you down. Whether it's Toby Mac is not perfect. It doesn't matter. Do not look to a person or a band as your example. Look to Christ. That's bottom line,
I love how 30 years ago it was, oh, you don't want your kids listening to Marilyn Manson. And now 30 years later, here's Robbie. You don't want your kids listening to Marilyn Manson.
I brought it up because Kanye, this is another discussion. Let's just bring this in. Kanye's doing the Jesus album, but he has Marilyn Manson on his albums. I don't know what you guys think of that, but I mean.
Well, supposedly Marilyn Manson has gotten saved.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know much about it. I kind of saw a headline. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but to me, we could talk about Kanye, because here's the thing. While Christian hip hop is watering down, going woke, you got Kanye going, hey man, I don't need to be ashamed. I'm going to say Jesus and I'm going to put him on the map. It's very intriguing how it's almost like God almost uses someone, even briefly, even if it's not genuine. Let's have that discussion. Maybe it's not genuine, but it's almost like he basically humbles and shames the Christian industry by going, you didn't think it could become big? This became #1 and blew all records, and it said Jesus right on the cover. And it's like, these guys are like, hey, let's water this down so we're more relevant. We sell more albums. We're not so preachy. And he's like, you want to see preachy? I want to give you a sermon on every single track, right? I just think it's ironic. I don't know exactly where it's going to lead, but I just find it interesting how, as far as being ashamed, the Christian hip hop industry, I got into it. I loved it. It was like listening to a sermon to a beat all the time. I mean, I grew in my walk like crazy. And over time, it's just like, and Lecrae, we brought Lecrae. I'm like, listen to an album. I'm like, where's the Bible in that? What does that even mean? Like, what are you even talking about? You're talking about social justice, and and it's like, hey man, this is important for a lot of people. Sure, you've blown up in the world, but do you know how many Christians grew up with you? And it's important for you to continue on with that journey. So I just think that people are starved for that, and they're going to look for it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say that one of the only artists that I can think of that's in the counterculture aspect that is still sticking up for his faith, besides John Cooper, is NF.
No.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, NF's not bowing, and he's not doing anything in the industry. He's not. I mean, there's a. Yeah, I mean, we can have a real quick discussion on NF, because I think NF's very fascinating, because it's like, all his fans at the beginning are screaming like, you need to put Jesus more in your music. And he's just like, whatever, I'm doing my thing. Right. But overall, if you look at the ministering component of NF, I mean, first of all, it doesn't swear. You got to respect that, becoming as big as he is, not even swearing, he's gained respect there. But also he has ministered through his music to so many people. Right. And then they learn he's a Christian. I don't know. It will be interesting to see what God's plan is for NF, but to this point, I can't really say anything negative. I mean, I wish he wasn't so angry. I'm like, dude, you've been angry for a lot of years. You gotta forgive him.
The Assembly of Gods. That's why.
What's that?
He grew up in the Assembly of Gods.
Okay, well, the guy's angry. The only thing I can say about NF, I'm like, dude, you are angry. I get it, but it's been how many albums, and you're still really angry. It's like, you gotta chill out here a bit. Like God, at this point, you think it would have taken it away, or he, learn to completely forgive, but it's like he's still got that chip on his shoulder. And maybe God, through his music, and he does recognize that, he says, I'm still being worked on through my music, right? Like, I think it's not just he's ministering to fans, God's working on him through his own journey in his own music. So I think he's genuine. I'll say that about NF. NF doesn't placate. He won't be anything for anyone. He'll be himself. and he'll ride that journey. And so far, I got nothing but respect for NF for sure. I mean, I don't even know where his story goes, but I mean, it's unbelievable how crazy big he's becoming. Every album, he just gets that much bigger. I mean,
well, Johnny,
yeah.
do they play NF? Do you play NF on your station?
Not even a slow song. Not even a slow song, eh? Or no.
We're contemporary Christian music. It's you know, we know where our lane is, and we don't deviate from that.
Yeah, they just know it's more like you have that lane with CCM, and it's just like it's just not gonna. It's not about. Trust me, I've had that discussion with him as well. He's like, no, not gonna happen. I'm like, dude, you need to put like an hour show and have it. Nope, not doing it. Like we've had that discussion before because I think music's so important. But again, we're living in the internet age. There is a ton of radio online stations where you should get any genre under the sun. So there should be no excuse. The question is, again, back to who are the new breaking artists that are coming out in all those different genres.
I mean, think about it though, because I mean, I launched the online internet stations for the rock station and for the hip hop station. So I mean, we tried to give that outlet for those who didn't want to listen to CCM music.
And what was it? Was it just? And again, it was. There was no numbers there. Like it really wasn't.
It wasn't as sustainable. I mean, we tried to promote it as much as possible, but as much as we were a little too early on it.
Well, here's the reality. Let's go back to radio. No kids are listening to radio, right? This is the reality. And I mean, that's one thing to do with radio. We're like, hey, how come we not playing NF on radio? Well, the fact is that demographic's not even listening to NF.
Right.
They're not even close to for the most part. They're not close to that radio dial. They're on Spotify. They're in a whole new world, right? So, and while radio is doing digital stuff online to kind of keep up there, radio as itself is not really attractive to the youth. So they're not gonna find a lot of music, or the people that are listening to the radio aren't gonna be happy when an NF song or a Skillet song comes on. Do you guys play Skillet? You guys play Skillet.
Yeah.
So here, they're the number one Christian rock band.
No, I get that, right? So is it just because it's hip hop? So is NF? Is it just the hip hop you don't play because you will play rock? Skillet's rock. It's just a softer rock.
Yeah, but
right?
Skillet also has some of those more ballady type songs that have been radio singles too.
So really, it comes down to the even if it's a ballady hip hop's just a no go.
There might be one. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever released one to CCM. Not that I could. I mean,
Toby
Mac is as hip hoppy as it comes, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I think we have a fresh IE. We have maybe one or two fresh IE. Manifest.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. But he's got a lot like more vocal now, like as far as singing and harmonizing rather than just rapping and being angry.
Well, speaking of Manifest, he's about to drop a new album with the guy that we've talked about, Sonny from POD's on it. And
oh wow, I didn't know that.
So there's a Canadian connection to tonight's show.
What a way to end it.
What a way to conclude it.
And you play Manifest like one of his songs on your radio station, and you guys live in the same country. There you go. I'm pulling the pieces together.
Love it.
Awful conclusion. We got to do something better than that. We got to maybe I'm not sure, but yeah. There's and Manifest, and that's my Canadian contribute. It's like the what is it? CRTC is like listening in, and you got to have at least 2% talking about a Canadian artist because we're Canadian.
Talked to Reliant K.
Oh yeah, Reliant K.
Reliant K is Ohio. So
Reliant K is Ohio.
But Matt Deason was Canadian. He was born in Canada.
Yeah, but we claim we
you claimed him, didn't you?
We did claim.
I mean, they're from Canton, Ohio.
They're like right by us.
They're like a half hour away.
Yeah.
You've really upset the Ohioans. I just let you know that, Johnny. I don't think you're invited back. Did you see both of them? Like, what? what do you mean?
Well,
from
it's like
Canada,
you guys claiming bare naked ladies.
Ohio.
Come on. Your biggest import was bare naked ladies.
Bare naked ladies. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Man, they blew up.
Until
like for Canada, we were just like, what is going on? Like they were just like kooky little band in Canada, and all of a sudden they became like this. Talk about a international phenomenon. Like they out of just joking songs. Like nobody would have expected those guys, any guys, to like blow up the way they did. But this isn't secular music sound off. This is Christian music sound off.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just listen to the outro.
Well, here's a little trivia for you Canadians. There was a Christian who was an artist, so an artist who was a Christian, and he goes by Shad K, or Shad in that's his moniker name, and he's a Canadian artist. Won all the Juno Awards, if you guys know what those are, and he is the host of the Netflix hip hop docu series that they run. So yeah, and he's done some stuff. And you guys got the artist Promise from Canada, and one of the
I don't
things
think
that
you can
he
stump Johnny when it comes to Canadian artists. I don't
and
think it's
so
possible.
so Promise, one of the things that he's known for is that he actually worked with Drake and has Drake on a few songs that are Christian-based songs. And Drake was doing Christian rap on the Promise or early stuff. So yeah, so there's some stuff that you may not know. So
Hey, Doug, a buddy of mine just texted me and he said Justin Bieber.
Justin
Bigger
Bieber,
than
the
Bare
biggest
Naked
Canadian,
Ladies.
of course. Just quite a little bit, yes.
Sorry. That's
And
all I have to say.
Sorry.
Justin Bieber's that was before he, came out as the pseudo Christian.
Isn't he like, again, isn't he playing the whole, like, I don't know much, maybe someone can comment on it, but isn't he like going to churches and worship services? And
Oh, remember he
Christian.
was mentored by Lentz of Hillsong,
yeah.
and we all know how that ended with him. And I mean, look, you don't profess Christ, and then the songs that he was coming out with that were blatantly Christian-based songs, and then he follows that up with a song about smoking pot, having sex. It just doesn't.
Why do you think they do that? Like, what advantage is it for them to go out of their way and like, hey, look at me, I'm praying, I'm going to Hillsong and tweet about it and stuff, and then do that when like the majority of Christians that watch that are just going to be like,
I think it's part of it's just part of the watering down. It's that you can have the best. You can have both.
yeah.
You can have both things. You can have a faith, and I'm not saying he doesn't believe in.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But it's that you can still live however you want. I think but that's that whole mindset within there. It's within Christianity as a whole, is that you can live however you want to live. Yeah. Where God has laws that do not change. God has a way that he's created for his people to live. And when we start to change one or two of those things, whether it be something we eat or we think we have doctrine of this, that changes then our sexual orientations. It changes all of these things, right? And that's why we've seen so much of this liberal progressive ideology is it all stems to, in my opinion, it all stems when we start changing the word of God. When the word of God changes, these progressive liberal ideologies seep its way into Christian lifestyles, church, music, culture, everything. And we end up with this mix match thing because now we have theology that tells us it's okay to do this. It's okay to do that. It's okay, as Johnny was telling us earlier, he was talking, about some of the letters that he received about, him talking about Christmas trees. And yet, you start to talk about stuff like that. But no, we already have theology that tells us, oh no, that's already prudent. This is good. This is how we should be. And if you go against that, and you look at the Bible for an answer, you go, well, you're messed up. We're going to cancel you, right? We see that.
Do you think Skillet? Do you think John Cooper is the last one that got to squeak through the cracks, and he'll be the only last one that's going to be propped up as big as Skillet is and as outspoken as he is? Do you think there'll be anyone else?
Talking about critical race theory is not very, against critical race theory is not very popular today.
No,
especially, you see in the churches, that they're going to be silent on these issues. Christians, you can have this view because let's be honest, most churches are still probably very conservative in a lot of values.
Sure. Yeah.
We have churches around us that are that would be conservative, but they won't touch these topics with a 10-foot pole.
Correct.
And if they do, it's always got to be massaged. It's always got to be, so that nothing is offensive. And
Does
that's
John actually in the new Skillet album that just dropped though? Does he actually? Because I haven't listened to it in depth. But
typical
does he?
Skillet. It's typical Skillet though. It's power ballad songs with
No. But what I'm saying is the message. He's not outspoken against critical race theory or warning what's seeping into the church. So my point is this: is like he can separate that. He can separate. This is my music. This is what it is, and me personally, this is what it is. But he's not blending it in, right? So we're talking about artists that are blending it in as well. But we can say whatever we want about John, but he's not making a point saying no. I'm putting that in my music, and he could. I mean, we don't know what would happen, but he could say, I'm going to throw one song on there and it's going to be right in your face. I'm saying what I'm saying. And he still isn't. So the question I would have for John is like, why? What's the reasoning behind it? You're so outspoken. You wrote a book and yet you're not putting it in your music. I'd really like to ask him that question. I'm not saying he's a sellout, but what I'm saying is why? Why would you put it in that music? But maybe he's like, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. They can learn about me. They can learn I wrote a book and read my book. They don't need to have it preached at, right? So I'm just taking this.
Yeah, but he's doing it from the stage.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Robbie, you sent me that video. Do you have that video pulled up?
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe next time we
What was an article? You're talking about the article?
Oh no, there's a Winter Jam clip of him.
Okay.
Specifically what he said in there, and he talked about, there are churches today that are teaching these young people that you can believe in Jesus, just not the word of God.
Yeah.
And he says, you can't separate these two. You can't separate these two. And if you do, you're living in a lie. And, these are bold things to say today.
Oh, I agree. No,
10,
I agree.
20 years ago, it was the norm. We should have said those things, right?
Yep.
Nowadays, that you have to be so bold to actually teach the truth again.
Yeah.
Within the church, church festivals.
So in closing, because we got to wrap up, I'm just saying, where do you real quick? Where is this going? Where does everyone see this going in 10 years time, based on the progressiveness of what we're seeing seep through, not just with music, with the church? What are we looking at 20 years from now, based on the trajectory? What do you envision it being like? Pretty much just straight up propaganda of the government and what they want to let it's completely infiltrated, or you have a couple stragglers. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, it sounds about right. If we're going for what it was back in the 70s and 80s to where we are now, I mean, you're going to get either watered down Christianity, or you're just not going to have as much truth, if you will.
I think those that will stand up will have to be underground. I think they're going to be canceled just as hard as anybody going against the culture now. So, we all know what scripture talks about, but we all know that throughout history, those that speak up, their message could last long, but they don't last long.
Correct. Yeah, no. What do you think, Chris?
Well, look at this. We just went through something for 2 years, and there are no mainstream artists, even churches, who were speaking up against all the things that we are facing, whether it be certain mandates, things that we needed to inject. In fact, they were actually encouraging of these things. So right there, we already know those that will actually stand up to those things will not be accepted in the mainstream world. And so, let alone what you guys are facing right now in Canada, right? All of these things, right? Where's a Christian artist standing in the front lines to fight for this stuff, right? No, they're going to be extremely PC so they don't offend anybody. This is
they'll just freeze your bank account. And then now we've learned through Canada that literally they'll just start freezing your bank account, and they'll, a week later they'll unfreeze it and saying, You thought about it? You're going to think twice. And for the majority of people, the minute you've got frozen access to anything and you start worrying, because I'll tell you, that was the first time for me that I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? No court order, no representation. They don't even have to prove that you did anything wrong. And when you call the bank, they don't even know how long it's going to be frozen for. That's terrifying.
Mhm.
You got bills to pay, you got a mortgage. So what I'm saying is, I think it's woken up a lot of people to understand that, yeah, we're dealing in a time that, unfortunately, it is going to be the bravest and the people that are called to go on those front lines, because not many are going to anymore. The cost is too great. And again, we know as Christians, there's always this persecution and standing up. But reality is, where it's at right now, we're not there yet. This has nothing to do with Christian persecution. But as Christians, we can see how quickly this could become a Christian persecution thing and how quickly they can turn.
Well,
So
look,
to me, it's like we're getting a grace period where God might be showing us, saying, look, prepare and understand the world you're going into. It's a grace period where we're seeing that it's blanketed towards anyone that just won't go along. This is how they're dealing with them. It's terrifying, but in a way we understand that, God is greater, and being alongside him and understanding the world we live in, we're going to be okay. Right. I just look at it like the trajectory on what exactly is the Christian music landscape going to be looking like. And will it just be looking like the church propaganda arm of the government? And I unfortunately think it probably will be that. And if anyone dares even rock the boat, they'll just threaten, your label's gone. I mean, right now, if anything blows up, like if John Cooper, if one of his little things blew up and the entire LGBT and BLM, he's got a hold of it and it went viral, I will go on the record and say that if it got so big and they got so much pressure, I think as big a skill it is, they'd be canceled. It is this powerful now. We're seeing like sitting presidents of the United States. Okay. Boom, gone. We're seeing now entire countries wiped out. I mean, right now, as we stand, wherever you stand on the war, there's 150 million Russians that are literally going to be getting their bank accounts shut off. It's a scary time. People don't deserve that. You can't just blanket it out. So yeah, going back to the whole music thing. We live in crazy times. And watching this all play out, especially, as music morphs and changes, I just hope that there's going to be those artists that, maybe they don't want to get political, and that's fine. Hopefully there's just good, solid music where God can speak to people while they're going through a terrifying time. To me, I don't mind turning on a CCM artist. I don't even care about their political beliefs, to the point where they're just sitting there and I'm going to be okay, man. God's with me, and I'm listening to this and I have it in my headphones and I'm like, I need this right now. I need that ministry. I need that music to minister to me right now, because I'm going through a terrifying time, right? I'm going through a time where I'm thinking about my family. I'm like, where is this going? So Christian music, bad or good or all this, it is still going to provide a lot of healing, ministering to people, regardless of their ideologies or their intent in their heart when they wrote that song. God will use it for his purposes. That's my closing. So great, man. Fun show.
Well, so I think we're going to wrap up the show here. So here's what I want to share with you guys in closing, is that the future for Sound Off. Obviously, we're going to be doing more shows like this, but we're going to be branching out and be doing. We're going to be getting lots of different guests to come on these episodes, not only with us, but a lot of us are going to be doing solo interviews with artists. And I think this is going to be, what do we do? How are we going to change this landscape of stuff? Well, for a lot of these artists, when they're interviewed, they get to talk about their music. They get to talk about that stuff. We want to bring them in, let them talk about their ministry. Actually, if they actually are in ministry, right? Or, what their testimony is, getting down to that kind of stuff. So we want to have some really engaging discussions with them, whether they are on the opposite spectrum of what we believe on some core values. We'll definitely have those interviews as well. So there's going to be some really great stuff that happens here on with this platform, and hopefully it grows and continues to get better. So we're going to try to do this once to every twice a month. Our panel will keep growing. We'll have different topics, and we're going to have super fun topics for us Maybe not for you guys. We're just going to talk about the music and
it's almost like we're just going to have a discussion. You want to come in and listen to be that fly on the wall, you can. But honestly, I look at this show and I think it's the most relaxing if we're just all having a discussion. Like we were not even on air, and if people want to come in and tune in, that's fine. But really, we're just having a great discussion and getting into it. You know.
Well, I'll say this. You know, one of the fun things that I could say that I had was the night that me and Chris and Robbie, we were all just talking on the phone and we were making fun of each other for liking All Star United or whatever. You know, because
have fun with it.
There's too much seriousness. Let's have fun.
Yeah. Well, Doug said Robbie looks like a guy who would like Code of Ethics, and then Robbie's like,
I'm like, I listened to Code of Ethics. I wasn't my favorite, but I did have Code of Ethics for sure. Yeah. I'm definitely, my background is like, you know, the hip hop, but dancing, you know, I was going to clubs and stuff. So again, that was just anything, you know, World Message Tribe. I mean, it didn't matter if it was dance or hip hop or rock. I mean, I loved it. So, and for me, like, it didn't matter. For me, I was just blown away that it was Christian. So I didn't even have to like an album and I'd buy it. Like I literally had a problem. I got like almost addicted to Christian music, but I was just like everything. I just, you know, it was funny because I just bought everything that came out, but there was so much stuff. I mean, you really couldn't get to a point where you could buy it all. There was so much stuff coming out, and now it just seems like, I don't know, it's not so much anymore. It's like, where is it? And I know it exists. I'm not saying it doesn't, but maybe you guys know on Spotify some really cool playlists or some up and coming bands and all these different genres. Because, like I said, maybe I'm talking to a guy that's really into punk music, and I don't know if punk's even in right now. But here's a question I have: what is the, other than EDM type stuff, is there something that's really cutting edge right now that the kids are really into? You know, like there was different genres that, you know, is there anything right now? Does anyone know like what's really cutting edge and really almost like rebellious? And, you know, like,
I know
we're all old, right? Like, but that's what I'm saying. We need to talk to kids and find out. Like, Johnny, what does your son say? Is there anything other than hip hop and stuff? Is there like anything else that's like the headbangers?
He's not dabbling in any of that stuff yet.
But back in the day, we'd have headbanger friends, right? They have the jean jackets, you know, they'd be into like Metallica and all. It's like, does that exist anymore? Is this just not cool at all? There's no kids at school that sit in a group and they're like,
I have a 17-year-old.
Okay.
And he listens to Japanimation music.
Okay. Well, that's a genre.
And honestly, there.
But he wears striper T-shirts.
Yes, that's because I raised him right in some aspects.
Fair enough. Like I said,
I'm like, what is that noise coming from your room? And he's like, it's Japanimation music. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, Chad's saying NF. He's saying NF, Robbie. Yeah, no, 100%. And I know that. Obviously the hip hop. I'm like, I asked Johnny the other day, I'm like, what happened to rock or anything to do with like electric guitars? Like, does it even exist anymore? Like, and he's like, actually, I don't know. I'm like, there isn't any new bands, like no kids that want to rock and roll anymore. I'm just like, and I'm not even a huge person into rock and roll, but I respect all genres. And I'm just like, where did it go? Where are the kids that are doing the garage bands and the new up and coming, you know, skillets?
Well, nothing makes mainstream. So, you know, there is stuff that's happening. But, you know, if you look at even, you know, I know we've kind of picked on Tooth and Nail for a bit, and rightfully so in some areas. You know, if you actually look at the Tooth and Nail playlist, there's a lot of artists that are coming up through their things still. But they've progressed to even allowing explicit lyrics in their music. So I mean, it's not even a safe haven where you're like, yeah, you know what, yeah, it's probably not super Christian oriented like it was early late 90s, you know, early 2000s era.
See, Josh Laurie is saying Christian metal is huge, thousands of bands. Yeah, I agree with you. Back in the 90s and stuff, I'm talking about new artists that are into metal. I guess that's my point, right?
Underground. It's all of that stuff is underground, and none
even
of it's
the underground is lame.
Yeah.
And
You know that the mainstream artists aren't the best artists, right? They're just the artists that got the record deal. They're not they're not even the best musicians. We know about them because they got the record deal, but it's not because they were the best. So I'm just saying.
So here's the homework. Here's a homework assignment for an upcoming show.
Okay.
Let's find 3 bands each that are underground
and a different genre. All right. Let's do it.
In 3 different genres.
All right. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I mean, Chris obviously, that's all he does is just devour music and knows it. What?
No, I'm sort of like you. I mean, I don't pay attention. Like I
It's
once
true. And again, maybe that's just us, our age
there's
group.
really nothing to pay attention to be honest, other than when scandals break, other when there's these news stories, it's I mean, everything mainstream is so EDM driven, that it's everything. Everything is EDM driven. The praise and worship music is EDM driven. Everything is pretty much EDM driven, and so and so it's becoming a cookie cutter industry like it's always been. But it's even more so. Everything sounds the same.
I agree with that. I mean, there's a reality to a genre, what's in, what's not. I totally get that. But there's good talent in every genre. And the question is, where's that good talent now that's coming out, the up and coming? So that's a good thing. Let's source it and see what we can find out, and maybe just highlight one artist or band each and say, hey, check these guys out. Christian, no one knew of them, and they're good. I mean, it's more from a ear point. Are these good musicians? Are these guys? If we were labels, let's go back to the label days. Okay, we've got all the money in the world, and we're going to create mega ministry labels. Okay, it doesn't matter. Who are we signing? Who are we signing? The new up and comers that we think are the new Toby Max or the new, I don't know, name the artist, right? Let's have some fun with it, because that's kind of what I'm looking at, is saying, where is the industry going as a whole? But let's conclude it. We can go on and on, but
yeah. Well, so if you guys got to jump, I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. I'm going to actually run a contest for everybody who's out there. I want to give away a free hat, a Take on the World hat. And we're going to be doing hopefully some updates on what's happening with that. So if anybody's got to bounce, you guys can jump out. Thank you guys so much for being here. This has been Sound Off. Johnny's going to bounce because he's got to get up at 3:45 in the morning. So I'm going to do a quick contest. So I am rocking a shirt, and I want to see
good guys.
If anybody in the chat, if you can guess the artist of the shirt that I am wearing, I will send you free shipping, and you get to pick out a hat from our Take on the World inventory. So if you guys can guess this, if not, I'm going to do it again for later. But if you do know and you don't want the hat, do not guess, okay? Because we want somebody who wants the hat. So if you want the hat, please jump into the chat and say, I want the hat. I just don't know what shirt you're wearing. So if you guys can see it, I'm going to show it again. So here is the logo. It is this.
Do I count?
No, you do not count. I would just give you a hat. This is a P, okay? And it actually, I'm going to give a couple clues. Kelly, good guess. But Jeremiah Dirt has no P's in it. So pretty close, but not very good at the same time. So here is my hint. It is the old Dallas Mavericks logo with the hat, if you can see it up right over here, and it has a vinyl record there, showing that it's music, or some people wouldn't call it music. I'd probably like somebody like Alan. But if you guys can guess that shirt, I'm not going to keep showing it to you. You guys get a free hat. And Robbie jumped out. No, you can't show that, dude. You can't show that. So I'm just going to stay on for a few minutes. If nobody has any guesses, I'm going to wear it again in a future show, and I'm going to try again as our show gets bigger. But yeah, and then you're also going to get a sneak peek of somebody, some people. I couldn't see the P. It looked like a J. No, it's a P. So if you can see that, it's a P. All right. So cool. This one's actually going to be really, really tough. So I will actually let Robbie. I wouldn't ship it to Robbie, but Robbie could guess it if he wanted to. But while you're doing that, while people are guessing, Doug, why don't you share maybe some of the interviews that you're hopeful to get for the future episodes? by
Well,
yourself, your solo episodes?
on my solo episodes, I'm working on John Cooper, Sonny Sandoval from POD, Michael Sweet from Striper and Ozfox, Jamie Rowe from Guardian. I'm working on some older hip hop artists from the Christian good old hip hop days of Soup the Chemist. So there's a lot being worked on right now.
Awesome. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely awesome, and you guys don't want to miss that. Looks like I'm checking the chat and nobody has a guess, so I'm going to have to wear this shirt on a future episode. And you guys remember this P, and this artist I really want to get as an interview as well. So hopefully I'll wear it on that episode, and then maybe you guys could guess when I have that person on there. And here's a hint: that artist doesn't go by this name anymore. So there's another hint. So I'm gonna sign off, guys. This was Sound Off. We're gonna get so much better. So guys, thank you so much for being here. Doug, Robbie, Johnny, hopefully you're still listening. Elijah, if you were listening, I know you're working. Can't wait to have you on the show. Josh was in the chat all time. He could have just jumped in and just started talking, but he said his equipment wasn't set up. And Josh has been in the music industry for a long time as well, so he's got a lot of insight. And of course, Alan is going to be a guest multiple times, and we're going to have him on a bunch of episodes.
We got to track down Dirt.
Yeah, Dirt. We're going to get Dirt
We're
on.
definitely gonna get Dirt on. Yeah.
Tom Dunn is going to jump through.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a blast. And then of course, the guy who can't be here for a few months is Rob Blackwell, from formerly of Building 429. So he'll be jumping in the show, hopefully as a regular, maybe by the summer, and then we'll be having a lot of fun. So that's all for tonight, guys. We'll be back with so many more episodes. Tomorrow is Sit Rep right here at Take on the World TV. So make sure you tune into that, and we'll be back hopefully real soon.
All
Good
right.
night.
Later, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
The breath in my lungs just can't hold me. No man. Start a revolution with no man control. Start a revolution with the breath in my lungs. Sound off. Sound off.